Welcome to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
And I'm Paul Ogden.
We are shooting on a beautiful September 15th, 2012, in front of our audience here.
Big audience.
Our guest is Karl Scharnberg, who's Republican Party candidate for Indiana House of Representatives from District 96. It's all in Marion County.
That's correct, yeah. It's all Marion County.
Karl, can you give your contact information again to the folks out there?
Sure. It's Karl, K-A-R-L, 4, the numeral 4, Indiana.com is the website. Facebook, same thing, facebook.com/Karl4Indiana, and also on Twitter at Karl4Indiana.
Paul, you were...
Oh, I was going to say, Karl, I've always curious as to why, first of all, maybe your general background, where you went to school and everything, what you do for a living now, if you can talk about it. It might be classified.
No, sure.
And then just why you decided to run.
Yeah, I grew up going to a lot of different schools. We moved a lot as a kid. I moved to Indiana here in 1983. Went to middle school here, high school. Went to two different high schools. Center Grove is where I graduated, and also I spent a year at Southport as a freshman. After that, I kind of went to school part-time, doing a class here, 2 classes there, for 13 years. IUPUI, up at Purdue for a very short period, and then back down to Marion College, now Marion University, where I took a business degree. Spent 2 years off, and then went up to law school in Michigan at Ave Maria School of Law, which is now down in Naples, Florida. So all the schools I go to and graduate from, they change in some fundamental way, either from a college to a university or from where they actually exist.
They're trying to distance
that's right.
from you, probably.
Could be. That could be it.
Well, the Witness Protection Program finds that to be a very handy tool.
Just move to school.
Move to school, and then they can change everybody's names more easily.
That's right. Been married for 20 years, since 1992. We have not had...
How many good years?
Those are 20 great years.
Okay.
Plus the 3 years that we dated before that. So 23 great years.
Good answer.
Well, I know my wife might see this later.
Yeah, sure.
But
you don't say you might see it later. I know my wife's going to watch this later.
That's right.
That's it.
That's right.
So, kids?
No kids. We have 3 adopted dogs. We're a foster family for Golden Retriever Rescue. And we're not anymore now that we have 3 dogs, but we have done that in the past. It's always stunned me that that's even a necessity, but it happens.
So why do you decide to run? This is a tough district, as you describe it.
Yeah,
you lost a bet, you said?
I lost a bet. That's what I say jokingly. No, really what happened was it was the legislative walkouts at the end of the session before and at the beginning of this latest session over the right to work issue. And not so much that I was in love with right to work, although I do support it and think it's a good idea. But mainly it was just the fact that there were other bills that were not being addressed during the time when these legislators were playing hooky from the floor and obstructing business. And so I felt like I wasn't being represented in the State House. And as a voter, I want to be represented.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's
in all fairness, Republicans have staged walkouts before too.
Both parties have done that.
Both parties are equally guilty of the same dilatory tactics of one sort or another over time.
I agree that that's happened. I will say with certainty, I will never do that, regardless of the vote.
And you also promise not to buy a really bad toupee.
I obviously am not in the toupee business.
I know you got 3 topics. I wanted to touch base on the second one real quickly. Mm-hmm. Education. What types of reforms do you support?
Well, I think,
and maybe don't support, because that's a big issue for your opponent. Great court.
Right. I think we need to allow schools to be more accountable at the local level. The one thing that I've been talking about throughout this campaign when I talk to folks is I've been using kind of the old 60s phrase, power to the people. And what I mean by that is that decisions should be made at the lowest level, in the families, first of all, communities, townships, and on up to eventually the state. So in that sense, when we look at the governance of schools and we look at the structure of how schools are run, those schools should be run mainly in the school building, in the local school building where the parents have more input, and that means more power to a principal and a teacher to make the decisions that are going on in that classroom. And by that token, then more power to the parent to be involved in that decision. And so those are the sorts of reforms I would like to see is allowing schools to be more accountable in that sense, that they're much closer to the parents, and kind of the old country schoolhouse sort of view of things, how you had an administrator who was very much involved in the community and was known by everyone.
I went to a country school. Most of our, well, no, I didn't go to
that's right, you didn't go to
Fountain County. Most of our administrators were hired as coaches originally, and I won't go there. You were talking about a third topic, and that's transit. And you're talking statewide, within communities. How do you find that?
Yeah, I know that there's been a lot of talk, particularly in my district, about light rail and Indigo, which the question, I guess, and this is sort of a fundamental question that of how I approach government altogether, is whether the first hurdle that a bill would have to pass is whether government should be even making the decision. Like I said, when you talk about power to the people, sometimes those decisions should not be made by government. Government actually usurps the sovereignty of the person by making these decisions. Public transit would be one of those things that doesn't, I think. There's no way that a family sitting around the dining room table is going to come up with a mass transit system.
Unless their name is Vanderbilt and it's the 1880s.
Perhaps. But again, it would be in service to, and that would be fantastic. I would love to see more of that. That's even better than government. But, barring a Vanderbilt philanthropist, a Carnegie with the libraries, this is a task that has to fall to the government. And ultimately, the next question then is whether it's local government or if it's state government that needs to make that decision.
Well, that's a pretty hefty bill, though, too, for a rail system like that. And the feds have stepped in, and I know that there's a corridor railroad going in California. They've made grants to different places. Is that something that you would be amenable to seeing the Fed toss in money?
Well, I think any time, we're not
going
going
to the Feds.
Yeah, we're not going to get mad if the Feds are spending money on our projects.
Sure.
That being said, I think we need to kind of look at the project as a whole, and not so much. The question is whether it's beneficial just to Marion County or whatever. Obviously, the plans that I've seen or what I've heard talked about extends to the surrounding areas. So it's not just a local area. It couldn't be something done at a local governmental unit. So we're talking about a state initiative of some sort. And I think the question, and one of the criticisms I think that I've heard about a transit system is that when you look at transit systems in San Francisco or D.C. or New York or whatever, they're always subsidized by the state. And that seems to be the big hitch that people have a problem with. Particularly on my side of the aisle, is that, we're going to subsidize this thing forever. But I think that if you look at just that subsidy, the question is whether, if we're going to be kicking in money, that's one thing. But obviously the train system is not going to generate enough income on its own. That clearly is the case. It seems to be case after case we see that. But does it generate other types of revenue? Income taxes, sales taxes that the state does enjoy, and I think so. You have to look at the larger picture of what revenues are being used and what.
Well, we used to have an interurban system in the state. You really cheaply ride between cities, and GM bought that out and shut it down. They wanted to sell cars, and we have Amtrak here, but it's really difficult to determine when it is the train runs. I mean, because it's an irregular schedule.
On the internet. They have a
No.
schedule.
Yeah, but it's like every other day, and there are different times that they're coming through. But see, the government, in Italy, they had government running the railroads, and they always ran on time.
Yeah.
That's been a number of years ago.
In the 40s and such.
Yeah, well,
Maybe before
20s
that.
and 30s. But the transit system here in Marion County, I live in a large city in Chicago, and it's virtually impossible to get around. I mean, it's every hour, in a large city where they have regular transit, you can just go out and stop.
That's right.
Get the bus, go. You don't have to plan your life around it. It's there so you can.
But isn't the problem that Chicago is densely populated? Indianapolis is so spread out. To me, that's the problem. We're one of the most spread out major cities in the United States.
But there are large areas of Chicago. I mean, it's like right downtown and around downtown. It's a lot more densely populated, and we're starting to approach that here. But there are large areas of outlying Chicago that are about the same density of population as this area. We're in Broderick, on the north side of Indianapolis. It's as densely or non-densely, however you want to characterize it. It's just that there are a lot of people living in a geographical area, and it's beneficial to have them facilitate their means of transportation.
Well, and I think the question is whether this is the time. And it may be that we're approaching the point where it might make sense to do some sort of a transit system. And I guess that's what when I talk about transit on the campaign trail, I'm open to the idea of looking at whether it economically makes sense at this point, and not just in the sense that it, is it going to be able to support itself? Because I don't think that's the total answer.
I don't think it ever will. I mean, it's a capital-intensive endeavor, and if you're going to have the people pay for it in order for it to pay for itself, they'll be paying $500 for a monthly fare to get to and from work.
And the argument is that we subsidize the roads anyway.
Right.
They're not free.
That's true.
Well, except the toll road up north.
Oh, the toll road.
And we won't go there. I mean, not physically either, but as a subject matter. But is that one area where we could get some payback of our federal dollars?
What, on toll roads?
Oh, no, just on transportation.
Yeah, I think we could. I think that's one of those things. If we were to engage in a project like that, obviously it looks like there are funds out there that the federal government does kick into these kinds of projects. If that's our goal, I think that's sort of a secondary question to whether we should do the project. We shouldn't do it simply to get federal tax dollars. The question
you don't know that those tax dollars will always be there.
That's right.
Get them now. Well, if you do it to build something, that's one thing. But if you do it for the operational costs, then you get that pulled out from under you.
Well, and I think.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that the big background part of that is that this is completely intertwined with the jobs question. We've been hearing these stories come out that there's all kinds of manufacturers and businesses that would expand if they could find workers. Part of the reason they can't find workers is because they don't have the right training, education, or some of the other problems is transportation.
In terms of on transportation, we're almost out of time. There's huge student debt, and it's really expensive to go to school. And I was reading this morning that the schools with the least student debt for graduates are like Yale and Princeton. And it's the state schools that people are coming out of having more debt, and we should have lower tuition for our students. Is there something that can be done there? And by the way, I'm in favor of just wiping out all student debt and letting the banks eat it. But is there something we can do in terms of trying to lower tuition?
I think the grand scheme of things, the best thing you could do to lower tuition is to eliminate financial aid. If you didn't subsidize schools, they would have to lower their rates.
That's another one.
Oh, that's really scary. That's very scary. But
we'll go. But Karl, best of luck to you. Again, what's your contact information?
KarlForIndiana.com and KarlForIndiana.com on Facebook as well.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.
Karl, thank you. And best of luck to you. And it's the end of our segment. We'll be back in a couple.
And it's here at